Hi, my mom has been working in an office for over 13 years and I know how easy it is to be treated unfairly there. This isn't just content for use, it's a story based on real experiences. I'm doing this so that you can recognize yourselves and avoid repeating the other people's mistakes. All names, companies, and addresses are fictitious and have been changed.
He fired me while scrolling through a Rolex app, barely lifting his eyes when he said it. Move every client contract into corporate. Today. His voice sounded bored, like ordering lunch. I stood there, folder in hand, watching him track some platinum Daytona like it was more real than the firm's own balance sheet. I told him I couldn't, that it wasn't legal. That's when he finally looked up, all smug arrogance turning slow confusion. What do you mean you can't? I didn't flinch. I just said it straight. The contracts aren't with Ridgehaven Holdings. They're with me, personally. His mouth opened like he had something sharp to say, but nothing came. Just that blank, twitchy stare like a Wi-Fi signal had cut in his brain. Then came the security call. No debate, no exit interview. He had me walked out like I'd stolen staplers or set the printer on fire. And that's not even the beginning. 9 years I kept Ridgehaven from imploding under its own ego. I wasn't the loudest person in the room, but I was the one who made sure the lights stayed on. While Weston was filming drone footage of his yacht in Key Biscayne, I was the one clients called on Sunday mornings when an overseas asset froze or a vendor tanked mid-cycle. I onboarded them, built the rapport, kept the back end clean. I rewrote every protocol after the 2015 compliance audit. I held every legacy contract because I was the continuity. No one ever bothered to ask how that continuity worked. That's the funny part. They thought I was just some operational glue, an admin, a walking notepad. Weston didn't even glance at my title before assuming he owned my client list outright. Before we go any further, take a second to hit that subscribe button and like the video. Seriously. 97% of people listen without subscribing, and it makes a huge difference to the team bringing these stories to life. It lets us keep showing you what power looks like when it doesn't wear a tie. Back to it. When the sale to Weston's firm went through, I knew there'd be changes. I just didn't expect stupidity to come in a linen suit with a 40-card wristwatch and an ego shaped like a poorly run hedge fund. First thing Weston did was gut our client retention team and replace them with some guys he'd met at a Scottsdale poker retreat. One of them introduced himself by saying, "I've closed deals on jet skis." That was day one. Weston didn't ask about client onboarding. He didn't review the terms of engagement. He didn't understand the difference between Ridgehaven Holdings, the shiny new entity he purchased, and Ridgehaven Strategic Advisors, the original LLC under which our oldest clients had signed. My LLC, the contracts, not company property. They were personally assignable. Most had been drafted between the client and me, notarized, dated, and stored in my fireproof safe. Not a single one had Ridgehaven Holdings listed as a counterparty. You can thank a 2017 dispute with an old compliance officer for that clause. At the time, it was just a way to keep my clients safe from sloppy acquisitions. I didn't realize back then that clause would eventually save my entire career and burn Weston's to the ground. And even when I warned them, gently at first, they brushed it off like I was being difficult. Weston especially. He didn't believe in resistance, just control. That was his whole deal. Own it, flaunt it, squeeze value from it. He once told the floor manager, "If it doesn't scale, it's sentimental." That's what he thought of legacy clients, sentiment. The funny thing is, those clients weren't sentimental about him. They trusted me, not the logo, not the office. Me. So when Weston fired me for refusing to migrate contracts I legally didn't control, I didn't panic. I just walked. Calm. Measured. I had a better safe in my garage than they had security at that office. Every agreement was signed, dated, with dual consent and assignment restrictions. I wasn't bluffing when I said I couldn't move them. I was protecting them. And myself. But Weston was about to learn how expensive assumptions can be. 2 weeks after the acquisition, Weston summoned me like I was a barista he'd forgotten to tip. He was leaning back in a chair that probably cost more than my first car, sipping an iced espresso and talking to someone on speakerphone about bottle service in Tulum. No hi, no context, just barked it out like he was ordering dry cleaning. "We're migrating every client contract into corporate control," he said, eyes never leaving his phone. "No more of this personal advisor stuff. Get it done by Friday." I stood there for a second, just breathing, just absorbing the weight of what he'd said. Then I asked, as evenly as I could, "Do you even know how these contracts are structured?" He blinked once, maybe twice, but he didn't answer, just waved his hand like I was background noise. That's when I knew. They didn't read a single contract before the acquisition. They assumed everything came in one neat bundle: logo, lease, furniture, and people. What they didn't realize, what no one had asked, was that the crown jewels of Ridgehaven, the 72 longest-standing clients, weren't under Ridgehaven Holdings at all. Those contracts were with me. Me, personally, through Ridgehaven Strategic Advisors, the DBA I'd established when we were still running out of the old Southport office. Each agreement had been written as a condition of trust. Some clients had even insisted on personal structure after a bad experience with corporate roll-ups. They didn't want to be numbers in a CRM, they wanted a person. And I was that person. Every intake file, every compliance memo, every service amendment was signed under my name and my entity. Legally, they were firewalled. Weston could posture and bark all he wanted, but the law wasn't a Miami yacht boy. It had structure, and that structure was about to slap him across the face. That night, I skipped dinner, just poured a glass of rye and sat down in front of the safe in my garage. It's an old Gardol, custom mounted to the foundation, 3-inch steel plate, biometric backup in case the dial fails. Inside, I pulled out 4 black folders marked A through D, client categories by risk profile. Each one had a red tab for any contract with reassignment clauses or grandfathered privileges. I flipped through them like a priest reading liturgy. They were all there. Contracts, amendments, notarizations, originals, counter-signatures. A few even had addenda requiring my signature to approve any third-party contact, let alone reassignment. It was meticulous and bulletproof. Weston thought this was about ego, about obedience, but this wasn't defiance, this was stewardship. These clients had trusted me to guard their wealth, their strategies, their futures, and I had spent 9 years doing just that, quietly, completely. I didn't go to HR, I didn't warn legal, I didn't try to negotiate, I just let him set the deadline. Because when Friday came and he pushed, I wanted the break to be clean. No ambiguity, no gray area, just paper, ink, and the undeniable truth that Ridgehaven Holdings never owned what Weston thought he bought. And the moment he tried to force it, that's when the trap would spring. Friday morning hit like a slow-motion car wreck, the kind where everyone's smiling until metal crunches. Weston was pacing near the conference table, phone in one hand, espresso in the other, half-tuned to some junior exec sweating through a transition roadmap, while also bidding on a $97,000 watch in some live-streamed auction. The man had the attention span of a chihuahua on Red Bull, and apparently the same level of impulse control. "I want all the contracts reassigned by noon," he barked to no one in particular. "Or let's make it easy, just fire whoever gets in the way." My name floated in the air like a slow echo. I didn't hear it from him. I heard it from the silence that followed. I walked into the room and stood there, folder in hand, heart steady like I'd trained for this. Weston didn't even lift his head. He just gestured like he was swatting a fly. "Move every client to corporate. Today." "I can't legally do that," I said, with zero inflection, like I was reading a weather report. He finally looked up, not in anger, not in curiosity, just confusion, like I'd glitched his matrix. "What do you mean you can't?" I let the pause hang, long enough for the junior exec to suddenly find the floor fascinating. "Those contracts," I said slowly, "are between me and the clients, not Ridgehaven Holdings. They're not yours to transfer." For a second, I thought he was going to laugh. Weston's whole brand was bravado, no breaks, no nuance. He looked around the room like someone else was supposed to chime in and explain how this was still somehow his idea. Instead, he muttered, "Then you're done." I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I just nodded once and turned to leave. He called security. I guess that was supposed to humiliate me. It didn't. 2 guys from building ops flanked me like I'd pulled a fire alarm. One of them asked, awkwardly, if I needed to collect my things. I said no. Everything that mattered was already safe. Everything that mattered had never lived in that office. As we walked past reception, Weston's voice echoed behind me, something about compliance overreach and tightening access controls. But none of it mattered. He was too late. He'd just cut the wire on the only thing holding Ridgehaven's legacy clients in place. Outside, the air was sharp and clean, like the sky had been holding its breath for this moment. I walked to my car, unlocked it, and sat there for a second with my hands on the wheel. He thought he'd won. He thought a firing was the end. But firing me didn't give him control. It took it away. He just didn't know it yet. 2 hours. That's how long the silence lasted after they walked me out. 2 hours of blissful, biting quiet before the first call came in, from a blocked number, of course. That alone told me they weren't ready to show their face. Corporate legal always hides behind unknown caller when they're about to admit they messed up. The woman on the other end sounded calm, but the kind of calm you use when there's a fire behind you and you're pretending it's just warm lighting. "Hi, this is Diane from Ridgehaven Legal. I have a quick clarification request." I said nothing. Let her feel the dead air. She cleared her throat. "Is it accurate that you personally hold individual client agreements separate from Ridgehaven Holdings?" "Yes," I said. Silence. "And just to be thorough, you're saying those contracts aren't corporate property, correct? They're under Ridgehaven Strategic Advisors, a DBA of my LLC, signed before your acquisition, independently notarized. Not a single one lists Ridgehaven Holdings as a party." There was a pause. Then the softest, most corporate-sounding exhale I've ever heard. The sound of a woman realizing she's standing barefoot in a room full of thumbtacks. "Would you be willing to discuss a voluntary transfer of those agreements?" she asked, already knowing what I'd say. "You just fired me," I replied. "So no." The call didn't last much longer after that. By the time I hung up, I could almost hear the ripple travel up the ladder. Someone had finally read what they bought, and more importantly, what they didn't. The assumption had been total absorption. That with the logo and the lease came the relationships, the agreements, the loyalty. Turns out Weston had bought a shell. A pretty one, shiny, rebranded with glossy pitch decks and airbrushed revenue forecasts. But a shell. The moment I was out the door, every client contract they thought they owned had just stepped into legal limbo. They couldn't enforce them, couldn't transfer them, couldn't even reference them without risking breach. And clients? They noticed. I got 2 texts that afternoon from clients I'd worked with for years. One of them simply said, "You're gone?" The other, "They just sent me some weird re-sign doc. Told them I don't do business without you." That was the discomfort starting to bubble. They had assumed the structure didn't matter. That legacy was just sentimental fluff. They'd bought the brand and thought they'd inherited the trust that came with it. But trust isn't transferable. It's earned. And in this case, it was mine. They weren't just scrambling for damage control. They were scrambling for something they couldn't name because they didn't even know it had been missing until I took it with me. And the worst part? That was just the beginning. By Monday morning, they were in full scramble mode. You could smell the panic through the LinkedIn activity. Half the junior team suddenly updated their bios with phrases like client liaison and relationship specialist, as if a catchy title would trick 72 clients into forgetting who actually walked them through every financial storm for the last decade. Legal sent me a lovely little letter that afternoon. A 3-page attempt at nullification, claiming my agreements constituted employee overreach and violated internal policy. I laughed. Out loud, alone in my kitchen. They really thought calling it overreach would magically transfer ownership? Problem was, the paper trail didn't care what they wished was true. The contracts weren't vague. They weren't rushed. Every single one had been signed under my LLC Ridgehaven Strategic Advisors, not Ridgehaven Holdings. They had dates, they had license numbers, they had clauses, and they had notarizations. Every client interaction, from the first email to the most recent update, was documented, logged, archived. It was all under my name, my address, my secure cloud. Half the legacy clients didn't even have a login to Ridgehaven Holdings portal. They'd only ever communicated through my direct line. But that didn't stop them from trying. Weston sent over some poor junior associate named Tyler, fresh from whatever crash course MBA program had taught him how to sweat in a blazer and talk like a podcast. He opened with, "We think there's a win-win opportunity here." I didn't respond. Not even a blink. He slid over a piece of paper with an equity-based reconciliation offer that read more like a bribe written by someone who'd never seen a retention clause. I read the first 2 lines, then closed the folder. "Did you have a question?" I asked. He blinked. I smiled, and then I stood up. That was the whole meeting. Weston didn't send another rep after that. I think he got the message. There's nothing more unsettling to a man like him than someone who doesn't flinch, doesn't argue, and doesn't need anything from him. They thrive on leverage, and I'd quietly taken it all. Every door they tried to open led to a locked cabinet stamped with my LLC. Every name on their transition spreadsheet came with a clause they didn't understand, a consent requirement they didn't possess, or a client who refused to answer their calls. And every time they tried to nudge, threaten, or sweet talk their way in, I said nothing. Because silence, when you're the only one holding the key, is the loudest answer of all. I knew the blade was coming down when my inbox lit up like a Christmas tree on fire. Not corporate email, my personal one. The one I'd use for contract correspondence back when Ridgehaven still had carpet that smelled like toner and ambition. Subject lines like urgent, re-contract pressure, and what the hell is going on piled up faster than Weston's LinkedIn humble brags. They'd done it. They triggered the trap. Back in 2017, I'd gotten burned by a former COO who tried to merge my client list into a partner firm without notice. It almost cost me a $1 million account. After that, I revised every single contract. One clause. Buried, but ironclad. Any attempt to assign, reassign, or transfer this agreement to a third party without explicit written consent shall constitute immediate severance of service without refund or obligation. Simple language, no legalese padding, just a quiet little landmine, and Weston's legal toddlers stepped right on it. By trying to force client transitions and send out reassignment paperwork, they had unknowingly voided 19 high-value contracts. 19. That included 3 institutional accounts and 1 generational trust I'd spent 6 years building. I didn't even need to lift a finger. They voided their own future. Clients weren't just angry, they were livid. One of them, a longtime estate planning client with an obscene net worth, forwarded me the email Ridgehaven sent. The subject line read, "New advisor introduction." The body? Pure condescension, like I'd been replaced by an AI chatbot in a pantsuit. She replied to them with 3 words, "Go to hell." Then she emailed me. Her subject line? "Your next firm better have parking." Another wrote, "We never signed with Ridgehaven Holdings. We signed with you. If you're not there, neither are we." And over the same sentence kept appearing, "If you're no longer at Ridgehaven, we're following you." That wasn't sentiment. That was certainty. They didn't want the brand. They wanted the brain behind it, and Weston, in his scramble to seize control, had torched the very structure that gave his acquisition value in the first place. The thing he wanted to convert, me, my relationships, the legacy I built, had never been transferable. It had been anchored in personal trust, not corporate fiction. But when you treat relationships like furniture, don't be shocked when they walk out the front door. And walk they did. One by one, quietly, contracts severed. Accounts disappeared from Ridgehaven's books. Revenue projections fell like dominoes, and all Weston could do was refresh his dashboards and scream into empty calls. He didn't break the system. He triggered it, and I just watched it fall. I waited until the dust started choking them before I sent the final message. Subject line, contractual clarification. No emotion, no commentary, just this. To whom it may concern, per section 11C of each agreement currently active under Ridgehaven Strategic Advisors, no assignment or reassignment may occur without dual party consent. Ridgehaven Holdings is not a party to those agreements. Any further interference or contact attempts will be construed as tortious inducement. Legal counsel is on standby. I signed it with my initials. No signature block. Just the cold weight of law behind every word. Then I shut my laptop and went outside to water my garden. No reply came from legal, not a whisper. The kind of silence that happens when everyone realizes they've stepped into a hole and there's no ladder out. But later that night, while I was sitting on the porch, sipping a bourbon and watching my neighbor yell at his lawnmower, Weston messaged me directly. It popped up like a roach in a clean kitchen. "Hey, We're willing to offer equity if you come back, with conditions. I didn't laugh. I didn't fume. I didn't even open the message long enough for the read receipt to show. Instead, I turned off my notifications and leaned back into the quiet. That's when it really hit me. They weren't trying to negotiate anymore. They were trying to beg with a bow on top, but the power had already shifted. This wasn't about deals. This wasn't about shares. This was about the one thing Weston's empire couldn't replicate, no matter how many suits he hired or luxury watches he hoarded. Trust. I built it. He burned it. And now he wanted me to sweep the ashes back into a gold-plated box and pretend it was worth something. They thought they owned the table. They didn't even understand the game. Every clause, every page, every signature in those contracts, they weren't just legal. They were leverage, and I had held that leverage quietly for years, never weaponizing it, never needing to, until they gave me no choice. Now they couldn't pitch to investors, couldn't speak to clients, couldn't even send a courtesy email without crossing a line that could end with them in court. And all I had to do was say nothing. That's the beauty of leverage when it's built on ink instead of ego. You don't have to shout. You don't have to threaten. You just wait for them to realize you're the one who wrote the rules they never bothered to read. 3 weeks after Weston had me escorted out like I was a temp who'd stolen a stapler, I launched StratVest Partners. No fanfare, no splashy press release. Just a quiet LinkedIn update and a personalized email to the 72 clients who'd once signed their names next to mine, not Ridgehaven's. 51 responded within 48 hours. By the end of the week, they'd signed new agreements. Clean, updated, ironclad. My portal pinged like a metronome, steady and relentless as transfer notices, account summaries, and onboarding packets rolled in. No one asked what happened. They didn't need to. Some sent notes. Glad you made the leap. Others didn't say anything at all, just signed and followed. One client's assistant wrote, "We've been waiting for this for years." Meanwhile, back at Ridgehaven, the silence had curdled into desperation. Word was getting around. A few vendors I knew quietly messaged to say Weston had started showing up to calls he used to delegate. One of them said he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Another said he kept asking about brand realignment and client perceptions. Then came the call that sealed it. Hallwell Capital. They'd been Ridgehaven's white whale, a $12 million buy-in deal meant to plug the holes Weston had blown through his acquisition spreadsheet. I'd been looped into the initial courtship back before the sale, helped lay the groundwork for the value presentation. Hallwell's due diligence team had done their homework. Now they were calling me. Their VP of strategy didn't mince words. "We're pulling out of the Ridgehaven deal." I asked why, even though I already knew. He said, "Too many red flags. Contract integrity issues, unstable client retention. Honestly, we weren't confident anyone still there had the authority to speak on behalf of the clients." Then he paused. "StratVest, though. That's you, right?" I nodded. He didn't need to see it. Silence works better when it's earned. He continued, "We'd like to talk partnership. Quietly, at first." I didn't gloat. Didn't send Weston a message, didn't post cryptic victories online. I was too busy. Busy welcoming back people I'd walked through market crashes, job losses, sudden wealth, and quiet retirements. Busy rebuilding something real. No yachts, no egos, no middlemen. Just paper, people, and performance. Each contract I signed under StratVest felt like a clean breath. No more translation layers, no more fighting uphill against people who saw clients as assets. And trust as an outdated brand strategy. Weston had fired me thinking he could erase what I built. Instead, he erased his future. And I walked straight back in, through a different door, wearing my own name. 3 months later, Weston offloaded Ridgehaven Holdings like a busted Rolex. Flashy shell, no working parts. The buyer was some regional wealth group looking for a tax write-off and a few leftover office chairs. No announcement. No farewell post, just a quiet transfer, a press release no one read, and a valuation that made even his former interns cringe. The client base never came back, because there was no base. Not really. Just names he assumed came with the furniture. People he thought were loyal to the brand, when really they were loyal to the woman who returned their calls at 6:42 a.m. and remembered their daughter's graduation date without checking a CRM. Meanwhile, at StratVest, we were running lean and precise. 51 clients had turned into 64. then 71. And then Hallwell called. This time, it wasn't about Ridgehaven. This time, it was about building something new with me. Their lead counsel, a sharp woman named Renee, walked into our meeting with 2 folders. One was labeled Partnership Terms. The other? Legacy Exposure Review, Ridgehaven Holdings. She didn't even open the second one, just handed it to her assistant with a smirk. Outdated, irrelevant, she said. We signed the partnership deal over lunch at a quiet place on the north end of town. Nothing extravagant, just good food, strong coffee, and contracts that had been read, reviewed, and respected. At the end of the meal, Renee raised her glass. To understanding who actually holds the contract. I smiled. That was always the fun part. Weston thought power came from the logo on the wall, the yacht, the watches, the staff who nodded on cue. I knew better. Power came from ink, from clarity, from the fine print people ignored until it crushed them under its own weight. He looked at the company. I looked at the paper. One of us did the reading. The other got removed.